Aloha! Hi, everybody. This is Dan Chun, co founder and president of Hawaiian Islands Ministries, known as HIM or HIM for short. So, welcome to the HIM podcast, where we interview people and sometimes roll some talks we've had from our archives over our 40 years of conferences. And we try to bring you some of the greatest, newest Christian thought leaders that can stretch our mind, teach us about things about faith, maybe about leadership, maybe about mental health, maybe about some self-help stuff. And we hope you always find some nugget here that would be really helpful. And today we have Christy Pierce, a longtime friend. And welcome, Christy, for being on the HIM podcast.
Well, aloha and hello to everybody. I'm delighted to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
And Christy has been in Honolulu several times, speaking at the HIM conference and at HIM seminars. As you may or may not know, she's a ordained Presbyterian pastor, and she has had a long time ministry. But recently, in the last 15 years or so, she's had a deep, deep interest in teenagers and adolescents who are facing severe mental issues, specifically suicide and depression and anxiety and other things. And that's why we're here. Christy has also been the author of several books. One of her first ones was Shut Up, which is my favorite book title in the world. It's actually Shut Up, Silence the Negative Thoughts in Your Head. And if you have Kindle Unlimited, it might be actually free right now.
Mm-hmm.
And then she wrote another book, God is Whispering to You. How can you hear God's quiet voice above the noise? And then third, a new book just out called Lifeline, Hope in a Mental Health Crisis. So a lot of resources, but the best resource right now here is at the HIM podcast, and we get to talk to Christy Pierce. So Christy, how did you first get interested in this whole mental health crisis, as there are so many other issues in life? Why this one?
Well, it's a wonderful question, Dan. I never thought I would be doing this, and I loved coming to him and meeting everybody and doing more the God whispering thing and healing prayer. And then a very tragic thing happened about over 10 years ago. A very good friend of ours here in the Bay Area, her son died by suicide, jumped in front of a train. And it was a devastating thing to their family, to everyone that knew them, of course. And so then I got drawn into it. I just felt God lead me. The next day, as I just feel like I saw a picture of a book that said "Shut Up" on it. And I really sensed God speaking to me saying, you're going to write this book for young people to know. When they hear a voice inside their head, when is it their own pain, understanding their own mental health, their own depression or anxiety? When is it God's voice, that they need to experience? And when is it the negative? Sometimes that's bullying, sometimes it's dark voices, and how to shut those up. So that book, actually a whole bunch of teenagers in Hawaii helped us with writing of that book. Over 1,000 people that were young people over the course of a couple years gave input, and we published that in 2015. And then that just began a big movement that kind of went, that student led, and it's really exciting. It's an honor to be a part of it.
And I forgot to mention that Christy is talking to us from, I think, San Carlos, California.
Right.
And so that's why she's a little bundled up, and I'm bundled up in a freezing studio. That's why I'm wearing a vest. But so these horrible things have happened, like suicide of your loved one. And yet you are looking at the terrain of what's happening nationally, maybe internationally, but let's say nationally here in the United States. And so what is the crisis? Because I hear that anxiety, worry, depression is at the highest levels ever, partially due to social media, partially due to the pandemic. But what is the crisis right now?
Right. Um, so it is a mental health crisis that they say is unprecedented in U.S. history. Though my daughter Corey and I went to the Philippines, met with all of their leaders, their mental health leaders. It's worldwide, but here, for example, in the United States, suicide is the second leading cause of death for young people 10 to 24. Right now, 77% of college students say they're too anxious or depressed to function. No doubt the pandemic made things a lot worse. Suicide was the second leading cause of death when I published the Shut Up book. But we like to say, the pandemic was a bit like pouring gasoline on an already raging fire. So 25% of young adults seriously considered suicide in the pandemic. And it's just grown from there, where you've got middle school, high school, college, young adults. It's truly a mental health crisis. And that's what we're trying to do, to step into the gap and help. Yeah, one of the things that's tragic is there is a huge shortage of mental health professionals nationwide, and so that's something else that people are experiencing.
And we're going to give you, the viewers, some resources towards the end
Hmm.
that will help you either online or even phone numbers that you can call
Right.
daily to get some help. So we're not just going to talk about the problem, but you're going to hear some great help. Now,
Yes.
also, I think I read 25% of college students and 20% of teens seriously considered suicide during the pandemic, and this is according to the CDC.
Right.
And you're hearing that as you go around the country and talking to people and you research this book.
Yeah. No, I mean, the statistics are just sobering. And, a lot of the young people tell me I don't even want to hear them anymore, Christy, because we're ground zero. We're right here. We see it all the time. And my book is full with stories of, like, my two girls having people come to them constantly that are struggling and trying to get them help. There's no young person, as my daughter Annie would say, that hasn't had some level of anxiety or depression in their generation. She said they're in denial if they can't say they haven't had some. So yeah, it's pretty widespread, and many people in the younger generation, they are very familiar with it themselves, or they have friends or family members that have. So it's definitely a crisis. The Surgeon General actually said right after the pandemic that this is a shadow pandemic to the pandemic, meaning when the pandemic happened, it poured what gasoline on that fire. And since that time, we have a raging mental health crisis, according to him. So, yeah, it's definitely happening, and it's very hard for many families.
So the Surgeon General is saying basically there's a ripple effect or
That's
the
right.
aftershocks for an earthquake, more seismic shocks going
Right.
on.
That's
And
right.
now your new book just coming out, you
Hmm.
have what I call, I don't know if you refer to it as kind of the 4 E's to get educated, encouraged that you're not alone, empowered with your own personal mental health healing plan, and then equipped to
Hmm.
help not only yourself, but your hurting friends.
That's
So
right.
maybe we could kind of walk through this. Um, how does one get, I mean, we have this podcast, but how does one get educated about how severe this mental health crisis is happening in our country?
Right. Well, I think one thing that would be helpful to put out there as a resource for that, Dan, is what happened after the Shut Up book was written is it became a nationwide movement of students. And that's part of what we do that's unique. I feel like I'm just a mom, and I'm very blessed to have three college age students too who've graduated that have been at the center of this movement. And so it's very much student led, student run, and that's exciting to see. So, all that to say, what happened was after the Shut Up book got published, this group of students nationwide, we have a mental health board from Hawaii all the way to Florida of young people, they decided to rebrand the movement the 1024 movement. And I being an older, like, mom person, was like, well, what is that? That just seems kind of, too, I don't know. And they said, Christy, no, you don't understand. 1024, because for our generation, suicide's the main cause of death for people 10 to 24. And our mission is to step in and help our generation. And so, all that to say, where do people find help in this time? One thing I would encourage to get educated is you could go to our website, 1024movement.com, and you'll see an awful lot of things that will educate you on that website. But education is the first step because there's such a stigma, Dan, around mental health. And just a lot of people don't know. A lot of parents don't know. And getting educated, as we say in the book, is that self-awareness is the first step toward healing.
And when you say 1024, is there a backslash in that, or is it just 1024.com?
No, 1024movement.com.
Movement,
Yeah.
1024, but it's just just
Nope.
1024.
1024. No dash, no anything between it.
And the significance again of
Is
1024?
because suicide's the second leading cause of death for young people.
From
10 to
1024.
And their mission is to step in and help their generation to change that.
So help me understand. I comprehend that the stress and anxiety, depression is the highest level in our country. But on the other side, what is it about our young people that would give up? Because some are anxious and worried and depressed, but they don't give up and want to take their life. So what is happening now that it's so self-destructive?
Well, one thing I would say in a simple way to answer that question, I have experienced, and I think the research plays this out, that people who are suicidal, they don't want to die, they just want the pain to stop. So, and that is very true for young people, and they don't understand that what they're feeling is temporary, that they're not alone, and that they can get help. So I find that to be the case a lot because, and I tell my own kids, they think they're going to school or they're looking at somebody's Instagram or they're walking on a college campus and everybody else seems to have the perfect life. And we're telling them no one has the perfect life. Everyone's struggling with something. And I think when they realize they're not alone, that there are people out there that can help and understand, that makes things a lot better because it's when you get isolated and alone and you just feel like you have no one to talk to. We had that happen, Dan, right down here in Palo Alto a couple weeks ago. We had a young guy that was a water polo player on his way to college to be a star. No one knew he was hurting. And right at the same place that my friend's son jumped in front of the train there in Palo Alto. He jumped in front of the train. It's just hard to even imagine. And people were just shocked because no one knew he was suffering. He evidently didn't feel like he could reach out and tell anyone. So that's part of what we're doing is reducing the stigma and then giving these kids a safe place to be able to talk about their problems so we can connect them to help.
Yeah, I remember in one of our hymn conferences, I think it was just 2 years ago, a teenage girl came forward for prayer and said, I came here thinking I'm going to kill myself, but last night I heard a talk that changed my mind. We got her, of course, in touch with her youth pastor, and her youth pastor had no idea she was depressed, let alone suicidal. Unfortunately, the plan was to get her therapist. So it's incredible. And what's hard is here's a school that's near a train track. So it's a little more accessible
That's right.
in some way.
Yeah.
And I just realized a few weeks ago as I was leading a mental health conference in Honolulu as well as Maui, which is going through extreme trauma because of the Lahaina fires and the Kula fires that burned down the homes of 10,000 people, their businesses, their churches, their schools. And I didn't realize until that weekend, as I was sitting there and we were talking about suicide, that I've lost 5 either friends or relatives or friends' children. I mean, I didn't realize 5 had taken their own lives, and 3 of them were Christian leaders. One for a nonprofit, a parachurch, and 2 were pastors.
Yeah. No, a
And
lot of pastors' kids. Yeah.
yeah, but these were adult pastors.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
so
yeah.
I mean, yeah,
Yep. No, I
and
know.
so it
It's
was,
epidemic, not just for the youth. We're focusing on the youth, but you're absolutely right. And elderly people, it's definitely not just teens and young adults.
and then in your book, your latest book, Lifeline, you talk about anxiety, understanding anxiety and panic attacks,
Hmm.
and maybe you can tell us something about that. That anxiety is not the same as feeling afraid.
Right. The book, what part of what I love about it is like my son struggles with a lot of anxiety. And we talk a lot about the difference between feeling afraid and your feelings aren't your facts, but anxiety, a diagnostic anxiety and panic attack is a whole other realm. Where it's so difficult to function. That's the main thing, where these thoughts are so consuming that you just can't function. And for these kids, it is the dominant number one anxiety and depression, mental illness that is plaguing these kids. So, yeah, it's stunning to me that 77% on these college campuses say they're too anxious or depressed to function. And so, what does that mean? Well, that means they're experiencing symptoms of anxiety or depression that are so strong that they just feel like they can't do life, they can't go to school, they're putting on the face, maybe telling no one. And it's extremely difficult. And of course, there's all different kinds of anxiety, right? I mean, insomnia falls under that. There's panic attacks, there's social anxiety. The pandemic really created a lot of social anxiety because kids didn't want to leave their house because the world didn't feel like a safe place. And phobias, OCD, there's a whole bunch of things underneath the umbrella of anxiety. And the book educates about all that. We have chapters on depression. What does that look like? And a self-assessment test, and anxiety and all the different types of anxiety, and a self-assessment test. So they can start to be empowered, as you said, to understand their own mental health. And because when they get it and go, oh, that's me, or I have an eating disorder, or then that's super empowering right there to be able to understand their own mental health better.
And as you've gone all around the country and as well as here in Hawaii, you find that part of it is the big lie, as you say, that everyone else is happy with no worries
Yeah.
except me.
Hmm.
And that's
Yeah.
the big lie that feeds even more depression. And of course, you look at Facebook and everybody puts their best picture or they're traveling to Paris and you're going,
Yes.
oh my goodness, everybody's accomplished and
Yes.
educated and rich and they travel and they're
Right.
all, nobody puts a sad face. I
Yeah.
think my daughter did that once just for a joke that she's at
Yeah.
the Eiffel Tower and she's really sad
Yeah.
because it's the opposite day, right? Everybody's happy and they're at the top of the Himalayas and they're so
Yeah.
thrilled with life.
Yeah.
But that's the
So,
lie, isn't
hmm
it?
that's the
And
lie.
that feeds the depression.
Yep, it sure does. That's absolutely spot on. Yeah, that's the lie. And especially, impressionable young people, when you're a teenager and, or a young adult or a college student, and you pick up your social media, which of course they're on all the time. And it just looks like everybody else is living their perfect life and you're the only one not. Or you can see that other people were invited to a party, but you weren't, and of course there's cyberbullying and all of that. So, there's no doubt that one piece of the pie when it comes to what's causing the level of mental health crises. Social media definitely is a part of it. Now, that said, if we didn't have social media, people couldn't go to 1024movement.com to the find help page and know how to help their friend that's suicidal. So, social media can be used for good and not good. But I do think this whole everybody else is having a perfect life except me, that adds fuel to the fire, no doubt.
And what's really hard, I think, is that when mental health issues occur, um, and Christians want to help, but we don't equate it with physical um,
Right.
illnesses or physical injury. If somebody breaks a leg or if they're suffering, God forbid, from cancer, that's kind of like we'll bring a casserole over or something,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
but if somebody is, I'll make it up, autistic, or if they're depressed, we go, well, we don't know what to do with that. Why don't we just not? We won't call them because we don't know what to say, and that
Right.
just makes the isolation worse, doesn't it?
Well, it really does. And my daughter Annie said something to me, Dan, that really connects with that. Annie said, and Corey have said that, a lot of parents, most parents are just love their kids and want to help and may see them suffering. And yet a lot of parents don't know how to help. And some parents will, maybe with the best of intentions, be like, you're fine, you're okay. No, you don't have an eating disorder. No, you don't have anxiety. You're fine. And one of the things Annie, who's one of the co authors of this book, is most excited about is she's like, Mom, this puts in the hands of people in my generation like their own interactional lab manual where they can be educated. They can look through this, they can research, they can come up with, I think I have this, or I think I've been abused or bullied, or I do think I have insomnia. And then equipped with that, they can go to their teacher or their parent or their therapist and advocate for themselves, getting help. And so, because, yeah, a lot of times kids are just shut down with their feelings and they're suffering. Like a lot of children are really suffering, a lot of young adults really suffering, and they need safe people to say it's okay. And I would just say to all the parents out there, as a broken, imperfect parent myself, that you don't need to have all the answers, that, as we say, love covers a multitude of sins. And your kid just, usually children, I think, will so appreciate you just saying, I see you, God sees you. I may not have all the answers as to what we're going to do, but I'm going to be right beside you and we're going to figure it out and get you the help you need so you're not alone. That goes a long way with a young person, no matter how shattered the relationship may feel like right now.
So two things going on there. One is, how do we empower people to help themselves? And then the second part is, how do we empower people to help others who might be in need? So let's do the first part. How do we empower people for their own mental health healing plan?
Right. Well, we hope that's going to be a huge help of this book, Dan. We would just wanted it to be very practical because one of the real tragedies in the midst of this mental health crisis is the lack of mental health professionals. We are in a crisis of that. And everyone listening to me out there, I'm guessing, is nodding because, it's so scary. Parents will call, hotlines and be put on hold. I know lots of psychiatrists in the Bay Area, but I've had to take children after children, or young people, teenagers, to emergency rooms, and sometimes they're full. So, and getting a psychiatrist is sometimes nearly impossible. So we have to, this is what Lifeline is it puts in their hands something they can do themselves. They can be educated about the mental health crises. They can flip through. As Corey said, Mom, make sure all the chapters are just 3 pages long because we live in the TikTok generation. So they can pick and choose which chapters interest them. Like, I think I might like to look at the bullying chapter or addiction. That's a whole other thing. We discuss all about addiction and self-medicating and date rape, drugs, all the horrible stuff that comes at these young people, and try to equip them to understand, here's all the things out there that might bring you harm. And being educated about it and self-aware is really the first step toward getting help. And then we present them with a mental health menu, because what a lot of people may not realize, when we think about mental health problems, we think about, well, what's the answer? Well, find a good psychiatrist or a therapist. That's awesome. But we say that's a piece of the puzzle. And the reality is, most people won't get there. I mean, by the millions, for multiple reasons of the blocks. Either they don't have the money, or the waiting lists are too long, or whatever. But that's a piece on the mental health menu. But what about exercise? What about journaling? What about video games? Some parents are going to hate me for that, but do your research. Go look at video games because, Johns Hopkins and Harvard and Mayo, they're actually advocating for video games right now. If within reason, I'm going to say that really loudly, more than 2 hours, then it crosses over into the internet gaming disorder. But, video games in moderation can really be an escape for anxiety. But then there's comfort animals. You and I have animals, Dan. There's all different things that they can choose from the mental health menu. And then they put together their own mental health healing plan. We help them do that, picking and choosing from this menu after becoming educated what most would help me. And then hopefully we'll take that to their parent or to their therapist or to someone who can help. We're really excited about that, just empowering them to do
Well,
that.
you all can hear how this Lifelines book is a very practical, almost in a sense, a compendium of ideas, resources, and walks through all the different issues, whether anxiety or self-cutting, worry, panic attacks, suicide. Um, Extremely helpful. There is a problem of finding enough mental health providers in every city.
Mhm.
And I know you once worked in Washington, D.C. I
Yep.
wish somebody who has connections with D.C. could get a bill or something passed where therapists can work across state lines with
Mhm.
teleconferencing now or
Mhm.
televideo appointments. What's blocking a lot of mental health is they can't cross state lines. And there are other health providers who could help, but they can't
Right.
get the access. And so even adjacent states, there's not that freedom right
I'm
now.
not sure. I mean, I should know about this, Dan. I'm not sure. I will say the pandemic made those restrictions lower. So now it is possible, and but there's still, it still could do work on that. Um, but the truth is, even in your area, you might try to find a therapist and not be able to
Oh,
get to
that's the
them.
situation
It's
here in
such
Hawaii.
oh,
Very, very hard. And
very
so,
hard.
and
Yeah.
that's why, I was
So
hoping.
online, some people have to just like our 1024movement.com find help page. A lot of people are going to need to go online to find somebody. And, there's a whole bunch of good, uh, organizations that usually can try to fit people in online.
Mhm.
But it's hard. It's a hard problem. So you have to push and advocate for yourself, and that's part of the mental health healing plan we talk about is, you know it's just a piece, right? Like my kids have been, they would say, so blessed to have the best therapist, the best psychiatrist. That's been super helpful, but it's not the only thing. And for them, their faith, being surrounded in a community of faith, prayer. Corey loves to take her journal and go down to Filoli Gardens, and that's kind of how she connects with God. Journaling, by the way, we all know has very documented statistical evidence helps your mental health. So there's a lot of different ways, other than just seeing a therapist and a psychiatrist, which we highly promote. By the way, one of the things we encourage these kids to do first, more than anything, is go to your family doctor. There are any kids or teens or young adults listening to me, your pediatrician or your family doctor, that's a very good place to start because they can assess you. You may have like something that's causing you to be depressed. You may have a vitamin D deficiency, something that's really minor that they can assess, or they can refer you. And so that's a very good place to start.
Surprisingly, national research shows that most people, when they're going a tough time, they see their pastor, whether Christian or not. They see a pastor in
Absolutely.
the community. And I'm not saying pastors are trained to be therapists, but they could be great referral people.
Absolutely.
And speaking about referral, in a previous podcast, we had Dr. Matt Stanford with us,
Hmm.
who's out of Houston, and he's with the Hope and Healing Center and Institute, which is an amazing thing because he fundraises every year so that if anybody wants therapy, they get it for free,
Wow.
whether
Awesome.
psychologists or psychiatrists, or it could be a teleconference, but you get it for free. And then they have referral lists if you want more work. But he does have a national uh, phone call, which I'm going to hotline, which you can call, which is 832 That's 832-831-7337. And daily, and this is the hard part, between 5 p.m. and 8 p.m. Central Time, 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. Central Time, somebody can just listen to you and then hopefully make a referral. It's not therapy, but
Mhm.
it's at least they can hear you. And if you need help, and I do believe, I don't know if it's a national suicide prevention. Is it 988? Is that the
Yes.
number?
I was just going to say, in addition to that, that's awesome. 988 is the National Suicide Hotline. Also, Crises Text Line, which a lot of young people prefer texting someone. You can text home to 741-741, and somebody is there 24/7. You can call K-Love. That's on our findhelp.com or 1024 Find Help page. And K-Love is there to talk, have a pastor pray for you. And then there's multiple other 24-hour hotlines that you can call on that Find Help page, because sometimes it's like people are in the middle of the night, so they can't wait till the next day. But 988 if you're in an emergency, and 911 if you can't get through on 988.
That's
Mhm.
right. That's right.
Mhm.
Now, you had mentioned for self-help, journaling helps, being a pastor, or obviously see a therapist would be the best. Journaling, you had mentioned. And so give us some tips on how to help someone else who's going through a
Right,
difficult time, because they may be
right,
so depressed, like, I don't want any help. And you know, or they may be the victim of bullying. How do we
right,
step in and say, hey, cut that out,
right,
gang? So and so's a friend
right.
of mine. What can we do to help those who are going through a difficult time, knowing that they may be very depressed or anxious, worried, or
Right,
whatever?
right. Well, I think there's a mistaken view that people have. A lot of us have, that I don't know what I'm doing, so I don't know how to reach out. So they don't. And rather that's someone or in their family that's hurting, or rather that's somebody they know is are suicidal, or somebody's been bullied, and we all feel inadequate, right? And I would point to Leanne Payne, one of my favorite authors from the Healing Presence. I always loved, she'd say, your inadequacy is your first qualification. All of us feel inadequate at those times, even pastors, even, therapists. And the main thing is, don't hesitate to reach out. Like, even if you don't feel like you know what you're doing, to say, hey, I'm just reaching out. You look like you've had a hard time, or you told me this and that worried me. Um, I'm here for you. Can we go get help together? If somebody is truly suicidal, in the Lifeline book, it walks you through, and 988, if you look online at 988, it will walk you through literally what to say to people. So you can know, they will tell you line by line, how do you interact. And again, don't feel like you have to do it perfectly. And we tell these students, because a lot of our research has shown that with these students, say they're being bullied, or they're cutting, or they're suicidal, all of our research has shown, who are they going to tell? Usually 80% will tell a friend or no one. So that's part of the end of our book, is called How to Help Your Hurting Friends Without Drowning. So we do these Lifeline trainings all over. They'll be online, they're in schools, they're in colleges, to basically help students recognize a friend, to see the people that are hurting, give them the tools to know how to reach out, and then help them connect them to people who can help. And the thing that we emphasize always to these young people, you can't feel responsible that you have to save your friend from suicide. That's not your job. That's God's job. That's between this person. It has to activate their will to choose, but you can be a bridge. You can
Mhm.
throw a lifeline. We had that happen just recently at a college here locally. We showed up. and we were doing a Lifeline training. And one of the girls came to me behind the scenes and said, "We're really worried about this girl, and she's not our close friend." Um, I ended up connecting with her, and the dean called me in the middle of the night, and we ended up picking her up, getting her to a local hospital. Wonderful team of people helped her. Her mom flew in town, and then she went home. She got baptized. She became a Christian. She's now wanting to become a therapist herself, and she's being a lifeline to other people. So, all that to say, just don't hesitate to reach out. And we're hoping that the book, this 1024 Movement website, can give you some tools. And, all we can do is throw the lifelines and do our best to reach out. And as we say, not live with regrets that we tried to do something to help.
Yeah, and I think, would you agree, Christy? Really, one of the first step if somebody is troubled and comes to you, you don't have to be the Bible answer man or woman. It's just listen. Just
Yeah.
listen. I mean, the worst thing you could say is, it seems to me, well, the Bible says, do not worry. So what's your
Yes.
problem?
Amen to that.
Don't you believe in Jesus?
Yes.
And I think if
Yes.
we could just listen and empathize
Yeah.
and maybe clarify, so you're really feeling down and you feel like hurting yourself, or
Yep.
you don't feel there's any hope. And
Yes.
uh, rather than, oh, the pressure, I got to come up with five cute answers right away to,
Right.
bring this person's feelings up.
That's right.
There's something magic about just listening. You
Yeah.
agree?
1,000%. No, I think that's the thing to do. And, sadly, my girls have had to become a PhD in this. I don't know how many friends they've taken to the ER. Corey's driven up to the Golden Gate Bridge. I don't know how many times. And just, she's not a pastor, she's a scientist, Annie's not a pastor. She's just a senior graduating from college. But just listening, like you're saying, just offering a lot of love, they often will tell friends, "Look, I know it feels like everything is horrible right now and there is no hope, but your pain is temporary. This is just a moment, and there is life out there that God has for you. God has a purpose and a plan for your life. So please let me go with you, to the hospital. Let's call somebody because I can't stand to lose you as a friend," kind of thing. So yeah, just listening, what's Jesus, the little fishes and loaves. We take the little fishes and loaves that we have and we reach out with what we know. And then, I think for you parents out there, I think it goes a long way for young people to hear a parent say, "I'm sorry." I would just say that. How many parent kid relationships would be healed? As my husband says, it's like pouring water on a fire. If you can just say, "I'm sorry, I made this mistake. I care about your pain. I'm here to help. I don't have all the answers, but I love you and I want to help. How can we do this together?"
Yeah, and it seems to also, if you're a student listening in right now, whatever age, that there can also be, it doesn't have to be major and grandiose, like I'm going to be part of this National Suicide Prevention uh, Association. It, it seems like there could be some preventive medicine, like you're in the cafeteria and you see somebody's always eating by himself or herself.
Yeah,
And you just say, you know what? Once a week, I am going
right.
to find somebody who I don't know who seems lonely and sits next to me.
That's right.
Because loneliness really leads to other things and or is a symptom of depression. And
Yeah,
wouldn't that be great if all the
absolutely.
Christians in high schools or wherever, all over in colleges say, I'm going to do something different. This is my ministry. It doesn't have to be major, but
We're
actually it
going to
is
add
major.
that to our list, Dan. I think that's brilliant. I think it's find one person, right? Find one
Yeah.
person on
Right.
campus that you're
Yeah. Just
going to,
once a week. Once a
one
week.
act of kindness, that can save a life. Boy, one of the things we're super excited about is actually two football players at Cal started this. They got there and realized that while the coaches were providing training and tutors and all that, there was nothing for mental health. So these two guys got together and thought, well, we're going to do it. So first it was a group of 3 guys meeting. It was a mental health support group, right? Just they didn't know what they were doing. They just got together, and then it was, 10. Next thing you knew, it was 20. And as my husband Ben says, if you want the room to go deep, you go first. So the kicker, our friend Jam from Australia, he went first and he would just say, "Hey, I'm Jam. I have anxiety. When I'm getting ready to run onto the field, I just feel like I'm having a panic attack." And then everybody else felt safe to do that, kind of like an AA group. So we're starting these groups on campuses in different athletic groups or in sororities or just in general on a school campus, where it's a safe place to come and say, yeah, me too with mental health. But I want to add on there the find one friend that's lonely, and reach out to them, because that can just save lives right there if you know you're not alone.
Yeah, and part of that, it occurs to me that if we can normalize that none of us are perfect, and here I'm going to be tough on the pastors here, that if you have some public role, and if you could publicly say, let's say a pastor,
Right.
I go through times of depression, or I'm seeing a therapist right now 'cause I'm working on something,
Yeah.
or I'm tempted, or I've blown it. I think
Yeah.
that authenticity really helps. But it
Yes.
also, for those in the pews, it gives them permission like, okay, I'm not the only one. And there's
Right.
not this stigma of getting therapy, not this stigma that I'm not the perfect follower of Jesus or whatever. That it I think sometimes pastors, we like to all talk about the victory through
Right.
Jesus, the victories in our life, or we wait until there's a victory to share it, rather to share, I haven't figured this out. And sometimes I'm still tempted, or I'm battling with pornography or
Yeah.
whatever.
Right.
Because where do you go if it's not
Right.
a safe place where every presentation is
Right.
you're this victorious person who never worries, and you never anxiety, and you're never
Yeah.
depressed, and you laugh in the face of danger,
Well,
right?
my
Marvel
husband.
heroes.
That's right. My husband Ben. He has a saying: "Nobody's success stories help anyone." And
Yes.
there's some truth in that. Like, if you can be real and humble, especially if you have a platform of any kind, whether you're a star football player or you're a pastor or whatever, just to say, hey, I struggle too. Here's my struggle. It gives other people permission to know that they can have their own pain and problems, and gives them courage to reach out to somebody. I think that is spot on.
Well, and one other thing, I don't even know if your book mentioned it, and I did go through your book, um, is that I wish there would be opportunities that we could defend those,
Yeah.
that if somebody is being bullied, let's say in
Mhm.
person, that someone would step forward and say, look, cut it out.
Yeah.
That's not cool.
Yeah.
Or cyberbullying, right?
Yeah.
To then jump into it and say, cut it out.
Yeah.
That's not cool. What you are doing is not right. And it's not like, hey, I'm a Christian man and you shouldn't do that. I mean, just
Right.
say, stop it.
Right.
Stop it. And that would mean so much to the person being bullied, because the
Yeah.
spiral is, I'm all alone. I'm
Yeah.
all alone. Nobody
Yeah.
loves me.
Yep.
Nobody will help me. And
Yep.
if there was a voice in that person's memory, like somebody step forward, cut it out. Like,
Right.
yep, yes, the woman was caught in adultery, but
Right.
Jesus says, stop it. No
Right.
stones.
Yep.
Stop it. You
Yeah.
know,
We have a whole chapter on bullying, and it's tragic. The people who are young adults or adults who are still traumatized because of the bullying that happened to them. There's a lot of bullying in the workplace for young adults.
yes.
We have
Yeah.
an
And
entire
older
chapter.
adults too.
Yep, and older adults, there's a lot of things that we need to learn. It's very helpful if a group stands up with you. So that's a really helpful thing if you can get a group of friends to come in the next day, if any young people are there, and stand with you and say to the bully, stop, like we're all together in this. But yeah, it's bullying's horrible. So
or, yeah, go ahead.
yeah,
Go ahead.
we really address that. We give a whole chapter to it. There's a young kid named Drake who died because of
Oh,
bullying, and it's
oh,
just so sad. Yeah. So we and their family has dedicated their whole ministry to helping people who've been bullied. So that's, I mean, just could we just stop it? Like, you know, that,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
that,
That's your shut up book part
yeah,
2. When
stop it.
somebody's doing that, like, shut up. That's not cool. But you
Yeah,
stop it. Stop
stop
it.
it.
Or and the second best thing maybe if it's just for whatever reasons, it's just hard to be courageous at the moment, is even if you went by later to the person, say, look, I should have said something I didn't, but I want you to know that wasn't right what they
Yeah,
said to you.
right.
And I want to be with you for the next time.
Yeah,
And if I can support you now, and maybe it's a confession, I'm sorry. I should have spoken up. And
yeah,
maybe I was scared and maybe you're scared. I don't want you to be alone in this. I think it'd be
yeah.
so helpful and could turn somebody's life around.
Yes.
Like
No, I'm that
that's a
I never
lifeline,
thought of
as your
that.
book says. That's a
That's a
lifeline.
lifeline. I never thought of that. That's brilliant advice, really. That, you know, even if you feel bad because you saw this happen, whether you're a teenager listening or somebody at college on a football team or whatever, or you're a young adult in the workplace and you saw something happen, it's not too late. Go back around to that friend and say, "Hey, that was wrong," you know, and I'm so sorry that happened to you. That would be very healing to a lot of people.
Well, and I don't know how it is today, but in my years in high school, the hazing even in locker rooms, right? The famous towel snap
Yeah,
where they
yeah,
whack you in your butt or somewhere else,
yeah,
and you just watch somebody get whacked all around, and
yeah,
nobody says, "Hey, cut
yeah,
it out."
yeah,
That's he's a freshman, we're seniors, we should be the
yeah,
mature ones. Why are we beating up on the freshmen,
yep,
right? And and a lot of people bring their baggage with them and they're more susceptible to bullying. I mean, you have in your book um, approximately 1 in 4 children experience child abuse
yeah,
or neglect in their lifetime. 1 in 4
yeah,
maltreated children, 18% physically abused, 78% are neglected, 9% are sexually abused.
yeah,
Um, and of course, the sexual abuse number is quite higher as adults. 3 in 10 women uh, and 1 in 10 men have been experienced sexual violence.
I
And
think the
and so you bring
numbers.
some baggage with you. I'm sorry. What
Yeah,
was that?
no, I think those numbers are very underreported, as we know, because
Yes,
those are just the
yes.
people who've come
Because the
forward.
embarrassment.
Yeah, so there most an awful lot of girls, young, girls that we meet have been through that. So that's also a whole chapter trying to empower them how to find a safe person to talk to and to heal from that and to be able to stand up for themselves, you know? So,
Mhm.
yeah, that is a sad, tragic reality. We also are very honest. It's like I say, as a mama bear, I say in the one of the chapters, I wish I didn't have to talk to you about date rape drugs, but I'm going to tell you this ahead of time before you go to college. And we walk people through. Don't ever take a drink from someone else. You know, don't always stay in pairs. You know, never go to the bathroom alone. It's like too bad we live in this type of world, but our hope is that this Lifeline book just is protection. You know, it gives enough knowledge that people will avoid getting themselves in situations where they could be a victim. So we have to equip our kids.
Yeah, the reality is, and not to get people paranoid or add to their anxiety and worry, but the world is a scary place.
Yeah,
And it's not to say, the devil's under every pebble and rock, but that it's difficult and challenging,
yeah,
and there is evil in the world.
yeah,
And and we need to help one another
yeah,
and pull together and be part of the solution. And we are looking for, in a sense, Marvel heroes who are
yeah,
not perfect, who will step forward and protect the bullied, come alongside of those who are anxious or worried or depressed or suicidal.
yep.
And man, if the church really could become that, you couldn't build a door big enough to keep people out. That these are the
That
people who
is,
care.
you know, this mental health crises, that's the way we view this, is it is an on-ramp to Jesus. We have two chapters in the book. The most important lifeline is Jesus, and we're
Mhm.
very unashamedly bold about that. You know, I've had publishers say, if you could just edit out the God part or edit out, the part about Jesus, I said, we're not going to do that. And number one, number two, do your research, because all the mental health research from, Johns Hopkins or Harvard or whoever you want to talk to says that faith and prayer very much improves mood and mental health. So we're going to definitely put that on the mental health menu. So we really don't tone that part down at all. We just need people to feel like that is something that they're going to hold on to as the most important lifeline.
And again, not to make people feel super paranoid of all the things we talked about, but sometimes we can look at first century church and go, oh man, look at all the persecution and their crucifixions, and the government's going to lock you up, and
Yeah.
Diocletian, the mean emperors going after us. But
Yeah.
we're under today a different kind of
Mhm.
persecution, more invisible,
Yeah.
and it's not maybe under one ruler, but the whole mental health issues and the challenges does call for us to step forward and be part of the solution
Yeah.
and help people. And if we are a victim or we're the one who needs help, then
Right.
know that you're not alone, and
Right.
that seek help. And there shouldn't be a stigma. It's
Yeah.
really the healthy people who seek help.
Yeah. It's just reminding me, Dan, Annie, who my daughter who just graduated San Diego State, before she went to college, we were invited to go to Georgetown. My cousin is the head of a whole clinical medical, she's a doctor. So it was a whole room full of Georgetown doctors. We were invited to go speak. And we got there, and I got up and spoke and did, talked about our organization and what we're doing for mental health. And then Annie was next. And so she took the microphone and she said simply to this room full of doctors, I'm Annie, I'm 17. I would like to know how many of you, when you were 17, knew of someone who died by suicide. And one person, I think, raised their hand, maybe two. Then she said, okay, how many, have known of somebody else? So there's just very few raised hands. And then Annie said, well, again, I'm 17 and I know of seven. And the last one is my friend who just jumped in front of a train last week. And the doctors were just like, and at that point, because that was their question, why is this so bad? They were all raising their hands to Annie, asking her questions. And why is this going on? Which I get that question. And Annie said it's multifaceted, right? It's kind of piggybacks off what you're saying, that we live in a dark world. And I think getting darker, these kids, what they're experiencing. So, she was answering the questions. It's multifaceted, the things that are coming at them. And so I think the important thing at times like this is just to learn as a parent and as an adult to be humble. I can't tell you how many parents I've had come up to me and go, well, is it really that bad? Like, we had bullying when we were growing up, or we have, is this really, maybe social media makes it worse? And then I tell them Annie's story. Like, imagine being a young person today and you show up at school and you look to the right or left, and you know that people are dying by suicide. You know the statistics, and it's so when they come in the day with their backpack heavy and maybe in a grumpy mood, to just give lots of love and grace and realize that it's I think it's a lot harder to be in their generation now than when I was in high school. I don't know about you, Dan, but like, I didn't know anybody who died by suicide. The people who died mostly were old. We didn't have just epidemics of young people dying all the time. And then the fentanyl, that's a whole other thing that's in our book. So many kids have friends who've died by fentanyl overdose. So, you have that.
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's way tougher. And before, if you got drunk and you were embarrassed and you vomited at somebody's party, okay, so three people found out. Now
Mhm.
that goes out on social media. And
That's
so
right.
again, you're walking down the hallway at school and they're all looking at you, and maybe they're smirking and mocking you like, oh, you're the one we all saw who
Yep.
was throwing up at
Yep.
last weekend's party.
Yep.
And it's a whole different ball game.
Yep.
And you throw out the national stuff of pandemic, mask, no
Yeah.
mask, vaccine, no vaccine,
Yeah.
Black Lives Matter,
Yeah.
creation care,
Yeah.
attack on the Capitol, presidential election,
Yeah.
stolen elections. and then the war of the Hamas and Hezbollah, and
A lot of dark
and in
stuff.
Hawaii you have the Lahaina fire.
Yeah, the Lahaina
10,000
fires.
people
Yeah, and
have lost their
hurricanes.
homes, and
You know,
hurricanes.
we
Yeah,
have
so
just a lot of scary stuff for these kids. So they
yeah,
need
and
Jesus.
adults.
And adults, yes, they need Jesus. And so that's the hope, is that mental health, which everyone's struggling with, is an on-ramp to them getting to Jesus. And we do a lot of empowering them to shut up the dark voices as well, because that's something we can do something about.
Well, any last words of advice or encouragement, Christy?
Right. Well, I would just say, if my kids were here, they would say this, we need to hold on to hope. We need to hold on to Jesus, and we need to hold on to hope, because the dark shines, but the light shines much brighter. And so I just think it's so important to know that, in spite of all the mental health crises and all the problems all around you, we have an opportunity to reach out to those people who are hurting. And we have an opportunity to throw a lifeline. And I can't tell you how many that we reach out to, because it's a mental health struggle, end up being pulled to a place of faith in Jesus. And that's our hope. And I think there's a lot of good going on, despite a lot of the mental health pain. So, and again, if we can support anyone, Dan, the 1024movement.com, anybody who we can help, pray for you. The Find Help page is filled with resources if you today know of somebody who's struggling, if you're struggling, or if you need to refer a friend.
There you go. And also, again, not only 1024movement.com, but that number, if you just want to talk to somebody just for 30 minutes going through a tough thing, it's 832-831-7337, 832-831-7337. And it's only between 5 p.m. and 8 p.m. Central Time. Well, thank you so much, Christy
My
Pierce,
pleasure.
for being with us, part of the HIM podcast. And for you viewers today, if you enjoyed this, go to himonline.org, himonline.org, and you have a chance to actually support financially this ministry, so that this podcast continue to interview people like Christy and others to give us hope and health and increase our faith and give us a perspective of life that perhaps we never had before. So please join us. I'm Dan Chun, President, co-founder of Hawaiian Islands Ministries. Christy Pierce, our guest. Thank you so much.
All right.
God bless.
Thank you. Thank you. God bless you.
Aloha, everyone.
Aloha.